Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful fall morning. We're going to give participants a couple extra minutes just to join in and get everything all set, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Again, good morning, everybody. I'm going to give everyone just another moment to log on and get comfy, and we'll get started with this morning's event. First and foremost, welcome to P&P Live. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us on this virtual platform where P&P can continue to bring authors and new books to you every day, even in the midst of our crazy situation right now. My name is Allison Witten, and I work over in the Finance and Ordering office at Politics and Prose, but I have the pleasure of joining the Children and Teens Department today to welcome our honored guest, Lulu Delacre. Thanks again to all of you for joining in and tuning in. You can click the link in the chat at any time to purchase a signed copy of Lulu's new book, Luci Soars. All purchases of Luci Soars will also receive entrance into a raffle to win a special piece of artwork created by Lulu during our event today. If you have a question for Lulu, you can click the Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. You can also vote on questions that you really want answered that other people have asked. Just click that thumbs up button. Again, I'm thrilled to be here today because Lulu Delacre has been writing and illustrating books for children for 30 years and now has 42 different titles. She is a New York Times bestselling artist and has received multiple starred reviews and awards. Lulu, thanks for being here today with us.
I'm delighted to be here with you, Allison, and delighted to share with all our audience my latest book.
Great.
Luci Soars.
Congratulations. Wonderful. I was just looking at the cover and I think that Lucy looks like you a little bit. Did you do that on purpose?
Well, not really, but there's always a little bit of one in every single book, right?
Right. Absolutely. Well, to begin, will you read the book for us?
Yes. Luci Soars. First, let me tell you that this is a book about a girl born without a shadow. And when she learns to see her difference as a strength, Luci soars. Luci soars. Shadow, shadow. I have no shadow. Mama says no one notices, but I do, and so do others. In the beginning, I didn't know I had no shadow. Qué linda was the way people saw me. They didn't know either. But I grew up and people stared. So I learned to walk always in other people's shadows. but I long to be in the light. One day, at school, one day finally came. I was brave. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. Mean shadows pointed. Mean shadows laughed. Mean shadows stared their icy stares. Tears burned my cheeks. And I sniffled. And I stopped and sniffled. I wiped my eyes and looked at the space where I had no shadow of my own. And I wondered, why do I need a shadow anyway? Does a shadow keep you on the ground? Something shifted deep inside of me. And outside too. Mira, I heard Mama shout. Está volando. And the mean kids with shadows attached to the ground gasped. Silence. I drifted. The clouds tickled me, and I smiled. Now, I know my superpower, the superpower that makes me strong. I can change the way I look at things. And so can you. So that's the story. And as you saw, the illustrations are done in a technique that is very unique. It's called monoprints, and I'm going to share with you how is it that you create a monoprint. So to create a monoprint, you start by making a simple drawing. Well, in this case, I'm making a simple drawing because there's time constraints, that is why. But I'm drawing on a paper that I'm going to later flip and cover with a piece of glass, any kind of glass. You know, actually I used the glass of that I removed from any frame photo. And this drawing that I'm making right now, this line drawing of a bird and mama bird and the little birdies, it's a drawing that is actually the base for what the final illustration would look like. Very much like the story itself. This is a technique that poses challenges. And the challenge is that what I draw right now on paper, of which I have a lot of control of, will not necessarily show the same way once I do my print. As you saw, I just flipped the tracing paper where I was drawing my birds, and you saw that I have registered. I have registers with tape. I register the paper, meaning that this is how I know where I'm going to place this very absorbent paper every time that I go back and press it onto the drawing that I'm now going to paint with my special slow drying acrylics. I just pour some liquid that actually helps the acrylics to slow, to make their drying even, to slow their drying. So it extends the time the acrylic, which is a water-based paint, it extends the time that it will stay wet. And why is that? Well, see how I'm applying paint that is very thin. I have lots of brushes, and I will use a different brush depending on what I want to achieve or what I would like to achieve. Remember, with this technique is a challenging technique in the sense that you have to accept that sometimes there are accidents, but I call these happy accidents. Accidents that become what you think is an accident. Actually, it's something that works for the benefit of your piece of art. And that's what I say, that this technique mirrors the message of the book. It's about accepting the challenges and making these challenges work for you, making these challenges turn into an asset for your piece. You saw that I apply paint and I am removing paint. Since I am applying paint on glass, I can remove that paint very easily with different tools. I have a tool that removes paint that is kind of like a rubber, a little bit of rubber knitted eraser. This is my tool, but you can use any tools. You can use toothpicks, you can use a little pieces of cotton, you can use paper. I use I press my very absorbent paper that has no sketch on, because like I say, I'm drawing on the glass, and I am pressing right now with a spoon. You can press your paper. You can see I have now an image already, the image of the branch and part of the nest. You saw that I lifted the paper. That is because instead of trying to do the image all at once, I do the image little by little. Why? Because, like I said in the beginning, the acrylics that I'm applying, even though they are slow drying, it's a very thin layer. So this thin layer can actually dry up immediately, like in seconds, even though I'm mixing it with this liquid that actually makes it dry a little, extends the time that is wet. But even within those constraints, it is so thin that it does dry quickly. So that is why I do my print, I create my print layer by layer. And that is why those registered marks that I have placed on the glass, as you see with tape, art tape, but you can use any tape, are important, because that's the place that you want to go. When I go back with the paper and place it, I place it exactly. It's registered with those corners, those square corners of the tape. So right now I'm going to press onto those leaves that I just painted. And you saw that the pressure that I applied was very gentle because I pressed with my fingertips. If I need more pressure, I would use the spoon. Why would I need more pressure? Sometimes you want some areas a little bit darker, and that's where you apply a little bit more pressure. Again, this is a technique that benefits of trials, of making many trials and accepting that if something is not quite right, you can go back, and sometimes it's even better than what you thought it was going to be. The element of surprise in this technique is, I absolutely adore it, because it offers you these opportunities to be awed and amazed about what ends up being in the paper. It's very, very exciting. It's like having nothing on the paper, and in 1 second later you have an image. So I find it very exciting. Right now I'm applying more paint to define the birds by applying dark around those little birds, the little baby birds. Then I am creating the shape of these birds. And you may wonder, why is it that the image, the ghost image that I have right now on the paper, is not transferring anymore onto the paper when I go back in there? Well, that is because it's already dry. And I leave it there precisely because it allows me to make sure that when I place the paper back again, the paper is in the right position. I can correct by removing paint. That is fun to do. I can add little touches. Right now I'm trying to do the eyes of the birdies, tiny dots in there. You can see on the left of my light table, I am using, by the way, I'm using a light table. You don't have to use a light table. You can just do, the regular tracing paper with your drawing over a white piece of paper. I would really suggest a white background. Otherwise, it's going to be harder to see what you're doing. But you don't have to have a light table. I have a light table because I've done many, many books. And by the way, I have been doing this for 40 years. I know that you heard 30, but it's actually 40 since 1980. And you can see, I wanted to point to you that I have many tools. You see to the left of my light table, I have the brand of of slowing dry acrylics, the golden open, that I use. I'm using only 2 colors in this illustration, black and red. And remember that with black, you can do many grays. With red, you can do many reds. So it ends up being more shades and, you know, more textures than just black and red would give you. You see that I also have other tools. I have different brushes, and I will be using those brushes. I have a toothbrush, I have sponges, I have all those tools because I need as many tools. Oh, this is fun. I'm creating a cloud. I am applying with this special brush just a little bit of paint that when I place the paper and press gently, gives me a cloud. That way of making a cloud or creating a cloud, I discovered by doing the artwork, the illustrations for Luci Soars. I will say that before I created the artwork for Luci Soars, I had never done this technique. This is entirely new for me. And that is something that I truly love about being an illustrator and creating my own books. It is that I end up taking a manuscript and challenging myself, thinking about what is it that I can bring as an artist to make this story shine. Is there a technique that goes better with this manuscript? That's something that I've already done. I use every book as a way to challenge myself as an artist, to grow, to enlarge my repertoire of artist making skills. And I truly relish this. I will say that you might see several books of mine and not think, if you don't look at the name of the illustrator, not think is the same artist, because many of the artwork that in different books looks different from one another. And you know what? I like that. I like variety. I like challenge. I loved doing the artwork for this book because it provided me with this lack of control that allowed me to grow. And that in itself, it's beautiful. So right now I'm creating, as you see, I'm doing the bird. You can see that I'm removing paint. I'm removing paint where I had already brushed some red. I'm going with my paper onto the registration marks, pressing gently, because I can go back and press more if I need to. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm pressing a little bit with more pressure with a spoon in order to be able to get some of the red on every single one of those feathers that I designed for Mama Bird. And you may notice the next time that I show you the illustration as it's in progress, that the cloud came first. And when I draw the bird, you are going to see the clouds through the bird. And I truly like that effect. I noticed that happened when I was creating, there's one illustration on Luci Soars where when Lucy begins to fly, and you can see through that cloud. And that's actually something that I really like, how you can see through. It has layers and it adds interest to your piece. Sometimes this happens that you have painted something like maybe the eyes or the beaks, and they didn't come through, they didn't print over onto your piece right away because you didn't apply enough pressure. And by the time you went back in, it was already dried. That's okay. You go back and you do your adjustments. You do your tweaks until the piece is what you like it to be. And it will never be what you exactly envisioned, because this is the beauty of this technique. It will always be better. That is my way of looking at it. And later I'm going to show you one of the illustrations in the book where I was entirely surprised at what came out. And I said, oh, wow, this is so cool. So I left it. And I think it looks kind of magical. So I'm applying right now some more pressure to the branch to add more textures. By when you're working with only two colors, and if you're working, for example, only with black, the only way that you have in order to add interest to your piece, besides, of course, the forms or the shapes of the objects that you are trying to picture, is the textures. And this is where I surround myself with all sorts of things like sponges, toothbrushes, grids that you use in order to do crochet, feathers, all sorts of things. Little pieces of erasers have helped me make windows, press little perfect squares to make windows onto the buildings that appear in Luci's Soars. I use all sorts of materials. I have them right on hand because sometimes you see it and you go, oh, this is what I need in order to create this shape. Rather than painting a perfect square, I just use a little bit of, I caught a piece of an eraser and use it like the rectangle. I press that onto the painting and then onto the glass and create the windows of the buildings that appear in Luci's Soars. And I'll show you later also, I have a grid that helped me create the brick work in some of the buildings that appear on the illustrations of Luci's Soars. I'm applying now the last touches to the leaves because initially I didn't press hard enough and I didn't notice when I removed the paper. The eye of Mama Bird, the feet, always looking for something that I can fix. Removing paint. Every single touch adds to the textures. It almost looks like I don't want to give up doing this, right? I'm like still looking at what else can I improve? Now you see that shape right there? How I fix the stem of the leaf? By removing paint. So I press now on all those spaces, all the places where I had some tiny fix. And I look to see whether, okay, is it there, that leaf now? Is it standing there? And once I'm happy enough, I think it's almost done. I think it's almost done. There's one final thing we need to do. And because I want to make sure that I don't have, you just saw that I removed some paint. I removed the ghost. I removed the ghost of the red right there because I now am going to draw the little black lines that represent the worm that Mama Bird is bringing to her baby chicks. And if I had left the red there, when I apply the black line, that black line will wet the red and could make a smudge. And that is why you saw that I cleaned with my Q-tip the red in order to apply the black for the worm. And that's the final piece. That's how I created my clouds. And you see what I used to remove paint to create texture. So oops. Oh. Oops. Hold on. Let me see. Okay. So I don't know if you have any questions for me.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, Lulu. That was great. Our first question is from Hannah, who is a second grader, and
Yes.
she wants to know how she can do something similar on her own at home if she doesn't have all the right tools, where she can begin.
Okay, well, first you must have glass or plexiglass. I will say that if you're in second grade, I would really recommend to put tape those corners, every single corner of that piece of glass, because you don't want to get caught handling that glass. That is rule number one. You always want to be safe. Paper, a white surface, you have pencils for sure to create your first drawing. As of paints, if you don't have these slow drying acrylics that I showed you, the golden brand, which are fantastic, and well, I showed you on the screen. If you don't have those, and you don't have oils, let's say oils are very slow drying too, then you could use regular acrylics or regular, if it's, I wouldn't use watercolor, that's gonna be actually it's gonna dry too quickly. But regular acrylics, but apply more water to them. And then apply the paint. And you know what, this technique is really about trial and error. I tried lots of papers, like these are some of my trials right here. I wanted to show you. This is before you start. You try things. You try things, how it's gonna look on different papers. So I always use a printing paper that is very absorbent. It's a paper that is actually used to print on computers, but I use it because it's very absorbent. So try different papers, and the paper needs to be absorbent. Don't try a paper that is coated, meaning that is shiny. No, it cannot be shiny. So, okay, the glass, the paper, pencil, water-based paints that you can add more water to, or oil-based paints that obviously would work too if you have access to those, and brushes, any kind of brushes. And remember, accept that whatever comes out of that print might be different, but might be exciting and might be an opportunity to create something really cool. Hope that answers.
Yeah, thank you. Sort of on the same track here, Taya wants to know what made you decide to try this art form? What made you decide to do Luci Soars this way?
Well, that's a great question. And this is where I'm going to say both the book and the artwork that I use for this book were inspired by an exhibit that I saw. I'm very much inspired by art shows. I go to museums, art museums a lot, to museums in general, but art museums especially. And I look at the artwork that hangs in museums. And there's two things. For the story itself, it was inspired by the exhibit of a very retrospective, a very famous painter, Magritte, that I was looking at his artwork, and much of his artwork of this exhibit dealt with shadows, and shadows that didn't belong. And there was this woman with a shadow of a bird. And there was something about shadows on this exhibit that made me think about the story. What if there is a girl born without a shadow? Then how I create my art came when I saw another exhibit, a show of Louise Bourgeois. And this show was actually was a retrospective, I think, of hers that had a lot of printing. And printing that, because Louise Bourgeois, it's an artist that is a multimedia artist. She's done printing, she's very well known by her huge spiders that she creates in metal. But I was most attracted by the prints. And these prints, I looked at them and I saw that she was using the same shapes over and over. And then I realized, well, I have to figure out how she did that. And that's how I discovered mono printing. So
very cool. Very cool. Well, you've showed us all about your artistic process. Thomas, who is also a second grader, wants to know what your writing process is. Where do your words come from?
Well, I just told you a little bit about the writing process. Before I create, before the art comes the writing. Now, I will say that for those budding writers out there, budding creators, I should say, there are two ways to come up with the idea for a book. One is to come up with the story first. And like for Luci Soars, I saw this exhibit and I started thinking, what if this girl born without a shadow, will she be bullied at school? How would she feel? How does it feel to be bullied for being different from others? So a shadow here stands for any difference. Okay, so it came with the words, but as an artist, I realized that sometimes you can come up with a story by creating the character first. And the characters, meaning that you create the drawings of your characters over and over. And I'm going to show you an example. Rafi and Rosi were born that way. I just created these two characters, these two tree frogs, and I created them by drawing over and over. And the more I drew them doing different things, and the more I drew each character, the more I learned how they would behave with one another. And after knowing my characters by drawing them in many positions and saying, no, Rafi wouldn't do this thing, or no, Rosi wouldn't do this thing, it's not in character, then I created stories for them. So I wanted to share that because sometimes budding creators think that they don't write well enough or they don't feel comfortable writing in English. That's another thing that I say, no, I write in English, but I think and dream in Spanish. And I've learned to listen to my editors and to my critique friends, my critique groups. And those things help you improve what you write. So don't think that because your language is not English, you cannot write. Don't think because you're an artist, you cannot write. There are ways to put a story into paper, many ways, many paths go into creating what you have right here.
There's obviously a lot that goes into making a picture book. Reed wants to know, how long did it take you to create Luci Soars or any of your books?
Well, any of my books, that's a big question because each one is a different amount of time. It really depends. When I'm creating a book that is fiction, I can tell you that the story may come, for Luci Soars, it just came pretty quickly, meaning in, I don't know, perhaps maybe 2 weeks or so. But I created it by doing small sketches. So I I knew what, I had the story in my brain, and I started sketching and making small sketches of it and adding the words. But then there are other books that take a very long time, like this book right here, Olinguito, From A to Z. This is a nonfiction book, and this book took me about 4 years to create, because of the amount of research that was involved in creating this alphabet book that is in Spanish and English. So, but then again, it's nonfiction, and even though I had an idea, the research involved and all the correspondence with the different scientists took a long time. So it really depends. Now the art, I can tell you that the art for a book like this is gonna take me about 6 months to create. I do not create art in the computer, digital art. So I very much like creating art, touching materials, and blending different techniques. And like I said before, I take every manuscript like the opportunity to stretch myself as an artist and learn something new.
Wonderful. I love that answer. So Wendy wants to know where you're from and how it influences your work, especially since it's Hispanic Heritage Month.
Well, actually, that's a very good question. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. I consider myself Puerto Riqueña, Boricua. And, but I will say my parents were from Argentina, a grandmother from Uruguay. My husband is the son of a Cuban, and I have friends from all over Latin America. So Latin America, I love, all the countries of Latin America, the culture, the heritage, what I learned, what the island gave me in terms of its, not only the Spanish language, but the heritage and culture that I brought here to the States was something that is still a source of inspiration for me. I mean, even when I do books like Luci's Soars, you can see the characters is a Latina. She speaks Spanish, because that is my experience. And I really believe that kids need to see themselves in the words and pictures of books. And that is what I've been doing, the books that I've been doing for since Arroz con Leche came out, which was, my goodness, more than 30 years ago.
Wow.
So.
I think we have time for 2 more questions. So I'm going to ask you some fun ones. Felicia wants to know what you like to draw the most.
That's a very good question. I don't think I've ever been asked this question. I think I like to draw everything. The things I don't draw well, see, in the beginning, okay, now I'm gonna go back to the beginning. When I started illustrating, I was much better drawing animals than people. And even though I took courses on the human figure and all that, mastering the human figure is hard. But I remember some very early reviews of my illustrations and how hurt I was about reviewers saying that the figures were stiff. And I said, you know what? This is an opportunity to make it better. Let me see how I can improve myself and how I can become better at what I don't master yet. So, that's something that I've taken to heart. I never take criticism as a bad thing. It's an opportunity to learn, to stretch yourself, to go beyond what you think you can do well, and try other things and see whether those other things, you also can do those things. Maybe in a different way, maybe not as so-and-so, because you are not so-and-so, you are you. And that is okay. You have your own style of painting or drawing. You have your own way of writing. You have your own voice. And the most important thing is to be truthful to who you are. to be authentic. And the product will show that.
Great. And our last question is from Asher. I'm not sure if he means your favorite book that you have created or your favorite book that you have ever read. Maybe you could answer both, but he wants to know what your favorite book is.
Well, I think that the favorite book I've ever read is The Little Prince, Le Petit Prince. And I like it very much. I read it when I was very young, and then I read it later on. And that book offers lessons throughout your life. So if you ever read that book, you will see that it teaches you lessons that you remember forever. And I still believe in its lessons. And my favorite book that I've ever created, oh boy, I will say there's always the last one. So right now it's Luci Soars. But before that, it was Olinguito. And before that, it was Us in Progress. So, it's really the very last book that I've done.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you everyone for such great questions. And of course, many thanks to Lulu for joining us this morning to talk about her newest book, Luci Soars. You can still click the link in the chat to purchase your own copy from Politics and Prose. And all purchases of Luci Soars will receive a signed book and an entry into a raffle to win the piece of artwork that Luci created for us today of the bird and her baby birds. Also in the chat are our social media handles at Kids and Prose to stay updated on future events, or please visit our YouTube channel to watch past events. Thanks again. Bye, everyone.
Gracias.